Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Today, we're starting a new series as part of The X called Hyped Up, technology that had promise but never really made it. And we're starting off with the company MoviePass. All right, good morning, D. You ready to talk about MoviePass?
Oh yeah, I've been really excited about this hyped up concept for a while. We've been talking about all the different technologies that kind of got hyped for a while. We used to see them all the time at CES and other places where we worked on some of them, and we always thought they were kind of cool, but for some reason, some of them didn't really work out. And I think that for MoviePass, it was really interesting, and we were pretty excited about it. But we also saw some problems from day one. So maybe you can give us a quick overview of what happened with MoviePass, and then we can get into kind of some of the details were and why things didn't work out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a super fan of MoviePass. I actually purchased MoviePass for my mom as a present, and she used it. And what was really interesting is that all of the things that we're going to outline, some of the issues they had and things like that, I experienced them firsthand because she had them, and then she asked me to help her solve a lot of them. So it's going to make for a really interesting deep dive today. So MoviePass, for those of you who don't know, was once called the Netflix of movie theaters. So for one flat fee per month, roughly, okay, it was $10, but there was a lot of changes that they did and went from 10 to 30 to 20 to 40. So basically pay a flat fee. And then if you're a movie enthusiast, you can watch as many movies as you want at any time. This was a really great concept and a really great idea. And actually, none of the movie theaters that I know of, movie chains, had done this at this time. And basically, the service was tested back in 2011 in San Francisco, near where we live. And they quickly got like 19,000 people to sign up for it. And the way they did it back then was you would sign up on their website, and then you would print out a voucher for the movie that you want to go see. And then you take the voucher up to the movie place like AMC or Alamo Drafthouse or whoever was around back in 2011, and you just give them the voucher, and then they would scan it and give you tickets to the movie. It definitely had its problems. There were slow response times, the printing of vouchers and using them when getting to the movie theater really slowed things down. So it kind of frustrated the movie houses a little bit, but totally normal for a startup. And the concept was good. I mean, to get 19,000 people to sign up for something right away, that's really difficult when it comes to building technology. Dee, did you, back then in 2011, I remember us talking about it, and you knew that I had purchased that as a gift for my mom. Did you try it out at all or have a chance to?
I didn't. I mean, at the time we were so busy, it was rare for me to get time to go to the movies at all. So it became, all right, well, I want to let this go. When I find the time, I'm going to try it out. But I didn't have the chance to. It didn't stick around long enough.
Yeah. So about a year later, I think it was like October 2012, they actually did a national rollout, and that price for the movies was about $30 a month. So you paid $30 a month, and then they had an app, and they gave you what's called a MoviePass credit card. And you would go into the app, select the movies that you wanted. It would charge those movies onto that credit card. And then you would just bring that card to the movie theater, give it to them, and then they would credit you for your ticket. But places like AMC refused to use it as part of their service. They just didn't believe basically in the idea and the economics behind it. But MoviePass pushed on, and about 2 years later, AMC finally agreed to work with them and test it in certain locations. But then the price fluctuated again, and now you're looking at more like $40 a month. So it started to frustrate users because it went from this like cheap around $20 a month to $30 a month to $40 a month. But people still held on. They really liked the idea of paying a flat fee and then being able to go to the movies whenever they wanted. And then if you fast forward to like 2016, they brought in a former Netflix executive, Mitch Lowe, to take over as CEO. And what he started doing was something that Demetrius and I do with our clients all the time, which is you basically test out different models for the product. So they started testing out these monthly pricing models where they would limit the number of movies each person can see per month. So at the time, I think they were testing out about six. And they were doing this in order to manage the loss of revenue. But at the same time, they were also trying out new things like adding in 3D movies for an additional cost. Like a lot of it was just like, how do we find the right recipe for success here? And how do we make it work? And this was around the time when it was really popular to start adding tiering models within software. So people would say like, I don't know if everybody remembers, but we had like a lot of freemium models where it's like, oh, it's free to do this, and then it costs you a little bit of money to do this, and it costs you a lot of money if you want like the full access. Well, they were playing around with tiering as well. And at the same time, they also started to establish some partnerships, and they made a partnership with a company called Studio Grill. And they were just really trying to solidify this in the market, but they were losing money every month, which is a typical thing that happens when you're building a startup and you're trying to scale very quickly. By that time, they still held on, had around 20,000 subscribers that were paying for the service and kind of dealing with the ups and downs. And then fast forward again, about a year later, they took an investment from an analytics firm who purchased a majority stake in the company. And they had this interesting idea. They dropped the price all the way down to $10 a month for unlimited movies, but you could only go to one movie per day. And the company was basically trying to follow this Netflix, Amazon model of if you increase membership to this crazy level, then you can start selling targeted advertising based on people's interests, like movie interests. So the website started crashing. They started having issues. AMC did not believe in them anymore and refused to allow MoviePass. But the subscriber growth skyrocketed to over 400,000 subscribers nationwide, which is huge. Well, they kept bleeding money every month and trying to make this work. And by June of 2018, they had more than 2 million people part of the service, growing rapidly on its way to 3 million, but they were losing more than $20 million a month due to the low cost of the plan. And they started testing some strange things like surge pricing and stuff like that in order to stop the bleeding. And it just became like this huge, huge issue. And typically with, big companies that are testing out new services, they can go a really long time losing money because they have the money to do that. This is part of their exploration and innovation budget, right? But with smaller companies that are just starting off and taking investment, they can only go so long without making any money before things start to get really painful and really challenging. Well, in June of 2018, AMC decided to start their own service competing with MoviePass, and MoviePass tried and tried and tried. They even thought about doing annual memberships where you pay less if you sign up for an entire year. And by August of 2019, the service shut down. Now, there's a lot more details in what happened with MoviePass. There were some bad business practices. There was some checkered past for people in management. There were other issues like that you can research. The Verge and many other outlets did stories on MoviePass. But what we really wanted to talk about today was the idea and why did people flock to it? And is it a great idea or not? And man, it was a roller coaster of a time, and I was following it very closely, especially because my mom was part of the service, and it was just exciting to kind of see where things were going. But Dee, I mean, what do you think about all these ups and downs and all arounds that happened during those, basically 5 or 6 years in which they tried to make this thing work?
Well, I think that it really shows the way that people flock to the service, and they had millions of subscribers for this company that nobody had really heard of before. Really shows that people want to go to the theater, but there's just a set of circumstances that might keeping them from doing so. So typically, for example, you think about the economics of going to the movie theater. Most people either have time or they have money. It very rarely coincides that you end up having both. So I could have gone to the theater more, and I would have loved this service when I was in high school or even in college, when anytime that we had like summers off, and all of a sudden you have a summer with a decent amount of free time, and maybe you've got some kind of a part-time job enough to, and you're living at home and you have disposable income, it would have been fantastic. I would have been going to movies all the time. But when you get older and now you're working all the time, you have some money and things, but you're spending all your time working, and when you have your time off, maybe your partner isn't as free as you are. Maybe they're on a different schedule. Like finding the time to go to a movie can be a little bit challenging. But if you can get on a subscription plan where it's less, it's not an a la carte process where you're making a decision whether or not to spend the money or just to stay home and watch something, then you're already kind of pre-committed. So I think there was a situation where a lot of people were looking to get to the movie theater because it provides such a unique and interesting experience. But there's just, you look at MoviePass and what happened to them economically, and there are just too many hands in the cookie jar, right? The studio needs their cut, the movie theaters need their cut, and then you have somebody who's basically just providing a subscription service to it. It almost feels as though it was more of a feature than it was a company that could stand alone. Like if the studios did this or if the movie theaters did this, like AMC tried to, they would have a much better shot at doing so because they're not entirely reliant on just a subscription service in order to get everybody paid.
Yeah, that's a really good point because when AMC decided to come out with their own version of it, I thought, well, this makes total sense because they can control everything from beginning to end, right? They know their customer, they know their cost, they know their economics around concessions, all those types of things, and they can kind of run the math on it, right? And really
Yeah.
figure out how can we fit this thing in so we don't bleed money or lose money on it, but we're getting more people in the seats because you and I have talked about this. Like if you go to the movies in the middle of the afternoon on a Wednesday, right? There's nobody in there. So
Yeah.
you ask yourself this question. You're like, well, if they reduce the price to go to the movies to $5 per movie and you filled every seat in there, would it be worth it? Because ultimately they make almost all of their money on selling food.
Yeah.
So it actually filled a gap, but I think people were flocking to the service because they were going to the movies on Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, Thursday night, right? The times
Mm-hmm.
in which a lot of people like to go with friends and family and things like that, not Monday afternoon at 2:30.
Yeah, you think about it from the operating cost is almost exactly the same whether you have that theater at half capacity or almost empty, and you're showing, a like you said, Wednesday at 2 p.m. showing. If there's 5 people in there, you're still showing the movie. You're not canceling the showing like an airline cancels flights if it's too empty. So you might as well fill that theater even if it's low cost, even if you're barely just breaking even with what you're providing to the studio, and then making some money on concession sales or other services. And like some of the movie theaters near me, they're making more money because they have like bars now where they're serving alcohol, they're serving higher end food, they've got smaller theaters with a nicer experience. All of these things. The reality is, though, that or baseline thing that I want to point out is that it's really demonstrated that there is demand for movie theaters. We just got to figure out what's getting in the way and kind of get those things out of the way. And part of it is the way in which the revenue coming out of movie tickets are divvied up. And now that we're moving away from this, exclusivity window that theaters have, maybe in exchange for giving up some exclusivity, they can get a bigger cut of the box office sales. And that is something that I think would make more sense. And it could also really open up this model where now either the movie theaters or the studios can provide subscription services and know that they're going to have kind of a baseline operating income coming in.
Absolutely. And also, word of mouth is huge. And people should look at this as an example of how, when you have a service that people really, really want, even if you're giving them something that's not sustainable, things will spread quickly. So, MoviePass, which is a great name, by the way, MoviePass started testing the service in San Francisco. And once they did a national rollout, I remember hearing about it because friends were sending me text messages about it saying, this is amazing. Like, we should totally sign up for that. You can just go to the movies whenever you want. Like, it shows you how if you give somebody something that they really, really want at a price that they really, really want and can afford, that even with no marketing at all, right, you can actually spread the word for a service really quickly. And that's all, that is part of user experience, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like they had the opportunity there, but there was just so many components that weren't working out, and ultimately it became a financial issue. Kind of, right? It's kind of a financial issue, but it was also kind of an issue with the fact that, like you said, people don't realize that there's little bits and cuts and of money and things that have to be like worked out for all these different players before you actually sit in a seat and they press play and you watch that movie,
Yeah, and
right?
I think there was a lot of things that could be done when you're managing a service like this. Like one of the main principles is you have to try to concentrate all of those subscription moviegoers on those Tuesday afternoons or those Wednesday afternoons where everything's really really quiet and you just need to fill the seats. What you don't want is those people kind of clogging up the big Friday and Saturday night premieres, or the busy days, because then it kind of interferes with people who are paying full price. So I look at this and I think to myself, they could really learn from kind of how Disney manages their parks, because Disney's been doing this for so long and they put so much effort into it. I feel like they figured things out. One of them obviously is you block out some of the busy days. You block out Fridays, Saturdays, maybe Sundays and holidays, and you're really trying to shift the subscriptions audience to those weekdays or days with fewer traffic, maybe even certain time periods like that are traditionally slower, like a February or something. Then you encourage engagement. You can get some events going, limited releases. People show up for things like re-releases of Raiders of the Lost Ark, or you could show. We've been saying this for a while. I'd love to go see, some Game of Thrones episodes, some Stranger Things episodes, even like now WandaVision or Mandalorian or Winter Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Would love to see some of those things on a big screen with the surround sound, maybe a D box, something like that. Those are all things that like you just can't get at home. I don't, unless you're, a multimillionaire, unless you're Michael Jordan or something like that. You don't have a home theater that is that good. You just don't. And then, if you get somebody into an app, then, in order to manage their subscription, you keep them there, right? You get some multimedia tie-ins, you direct them to some audiobooks, some comic books, some soundtracks. Maybe you can get them connected to some video games, other kinds of advertising, or just different experiences within the app itself that are related to the release. And then you have a sticky app that can bring some revenue in also, and not just be a overall cost suck relative to just getting people into the movie theater.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about there is basically time, and time equals money, right? It's getting all those things baked in and dialed in and working for the user and kind of encouraging them to go see movies at certain times and things like that. And when you're running a startup, I think that's where the challenge comes in, is like you only have so much money and you're trying to put those resources towards what you think is the most effective way to get ahead. And it takes kind of nowadays it takes all of it, because there's so much competition for people's time, to get people really kind of baked into your service and stuck on it. Like, let me give you an example. So next to my house, there's a boba
Uh-huh.
place, right? And they send me these notifications all the time. And one of the things that they do is during their downtimes, they just send me notifications saying, if you come in the next hour, you get 50% off your drink. And I would sometimes show up and
Yeah.
there'd be a line out the door,
Mm-hmm.
because they've kind of figured it out, right? They're like, hey, like this is the time when nobody really comes in to buy a drink. So we'll just cut the price in half, encourage them to come over and make some revenue during that time. And this is something that Disney has kind of mastered, right? Like they'll give you better deals on things if you show up on a Wednesday and stay until Friday rather than a Friday through a Sunday and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that MoviePass could have benefited from if they could have figured that out. But what I think was kind of this bigger overarching thing that I know that you talk about a lot, so I'd love to hear your input on it. But this idea that you have to have rapid growth and you have to do everything at light speed, right?
Yeah, I can understand where that came from, and we kind of have, and this wasn't always the case. A lot of the biggest companies in Silicon Valley, they were able to grow organically. They were able to bootstrap and grow organically and establish themselves as companies who have lasted for decades and decades. But probably around 10, 15 years ago, it kind of became very trendy to blitzscale, to try to get out and to be the first to scale. First it was, first to market because you have a competitive advantage, you have no competitors. Then it was first to scale, which was, even if you're following somebody, if you scale first, then you can take that advantage of being ahead of other people. Well, I think that one of the things that has happened is that the technological capability in order to get ahead of people is not as meaningful anymore. Like, people have kind of caught up. Unless you're really on the bleeding edge with like natural language processing or AI or something like that, or self-driving cars, things that like technologically are incredibly difficult to complete, and it's almost like you're breaking new ground from a technological standpoint. Then first to scale usually means that you're the one who uncovers all the landmines and all the problems and the mistakes, so that your competitors can come up behind you and find the easy way by learning from your mistakes and figuring it out. So you look at who are the most successful companies right now. They're not people who are first to market or first to scale. You have companies like Google, you have Apple, you have Facebook. They tend to wait for someone else to scale and then learn from their mistakes. Now, Apple, obviously, when it came to PCs, they were one of the originators. But when it came to smartphones, or even the technologies within smartphones, they had the advantage of looking at what BlackBerry and Palm were doing with their smartphones and learning from what they thought were inefficiencies or failures within that, and then using that information in order to develop the first iPhone. And then from there to continue to develop the iPhone and to make it one of the best devices in the world today. Now, throughout the life of the iPhone and the iPad, they've done the same thing. They've looked at, there were some of the later people to adopt things like NFC and some of those technologies. They looked at what other people were doing with it, how they were kind of experimenting with it in other devices, and then they put together a coherent user experience based on the learnings from their competitors. It's the same thing that Google did with Yahoo and Facebook did with MySpace and Friendster. They're not really concerned with getting out in front of everybody else and not having any competition. The real winners will be the people who really create the best experience and just compete through their ideas and through their understanding of users and through good design. Ultimately, that's the difference maker. So for MoviePass, who was under this pressure from their investors and from this perspective of blitzscaling, they were rushing from process to process, trying to figure out what's the right formula, when it's almost like if they had time to work organically. It's interesting because you look at it and they ended up having 7 years, but all those 7 years were things where they were kind of struggling to make ends meet, as opposed to looking at ways in which they can have more effective partnerships in order to get the economics to work out.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about there is the difference between, and you and I have seen this both ways, probably hundreds of times. One is I'm tripping over my feet and trying to keep up with user demand. The other side is I have capped the amount of users that I'm allowing for a period of time and making it invite only,
Mm-hmm.
working out all the kinks, and then opening it up later,
Yeah.
right? The tripping over your feet one is tough. And that's basically what MoviePass did. They were like, if we keep lowering the barriers, making it only $10 a month, unlimited movies, one per day, and suddenly it's going from 20,000 users to 100,000 users to 400,000 users, you have to have a tremendous operating capability, meaning a big team to kind of help you do that. And you have to have a tremendous amount of investment to kind of keep up with it. And if you don't have those two things in line, as you and I have seen many, many times, a great idea ends up collapsing. And part of this too is like when you show up to a partner, let's say AMC, you're probably rushing. I was not there, so I don't know, but you're probably rushing or trying to push through your service rather than
Hmm.
trying to figure out ways to partner properly with your service in order to delight their users and keep them happy and test it out and roll it out properly. But
Yeah.
I understand that anxiety because when you have a startup and you're moving with it, you keep thinking someone's behind me with the same idea and they're going to move twice as fast if I don't get out there, get it into the market, and establish dominance basically in the space. But what we've actually learned from doing research on these particular companies is that's usually, sometimes, but usually not the case. What's usually the case is what you said, which is having an amazing experience, delighting the user, rolling it out, fairly quickly, but not like rapidly, has yielded these really, really big companies that people fall in love with. Because what we've realized is that the erosion of user experience happens quickly. It happens within the first, couple of months that someone's trying out your service, right? They'll tolerate changes, they'll tolerate bugs for a little bit, just a little bit, and
Hmm.
then they're gone. So if you can get them happy in the beginning, you're more likely to keep them when you grow. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that they could have considered. But it's easy for me to say hindsight 2020. I'm just looking at this from the outside perspective of kind of what you and I do for a living. But I do look at it and thought to myself, man, you got a great name, you got a great idea, you got users that want this. Like, you can make this work.
Yeah, and to your point, the way that MoviePass kind of experimented with their entire service is not it's not how FANG companies do it. And we've worked with all the FANG companies, and the few that we haven't, we have quite a few friends working within there who we talk to all the time. They don't do it like that. They don't experiment with their entire company and their entire service offering. They create test beds. And that's a lot of times where we work, where before they release something, or a lot of times before they even build it, we're out there testing it to see how users are going to respond to it. How is it going to operate within their margins? Like, we're doing the math both from a cost perspective, the cost to the user perspective, the value to the user perspective. And we're figuring all this out before they go out and do a full market test. But within the startup community, that hasn't really caught on for whatever reason. And to some extent, I think that's because they're not always super aware of this process. They'll go out and go right to a market test to build it and release it. And then if it fails, then we'll just shut the company down and move on to something else. And while that works out really well for the investors who can know if they have a profit and loss right off the bat, it can slow things down from a technological advancement perspective, from a consumer value perspective, and it's often devastating to founders or early employees who really believed in the concept, and they got cheered. They got skinned in the process.
Yeah, and what this experience actually did of MoviePass was it basically opened up the can of opportunity for everyone else. So
Hmm.
it basically showed all the different movie house chains, hey, people have an appetite for subscription services, so maybe you should figure one out for yourself.
I think it scared some people off. Like, I think we're getting to the point where people will start trying it again, and the right people doing it who are in the position to really advantage from it. But I think it definitely scared people off. Quite a few people took a look at this and said, "Oh, it's not viable because it didn't work this one time."
Let's talk about the elephant in the room for a minute, COVID-19. So, do you think that the fact that people now either are afraid or don't want to or not choosing to go back to the movies right now, that this might be a big opportunity for a relaunch of movie subscriptions where you can get one of these things again?
I do, and there's several reasons for that. I think that you start looking at what the major studios are doing now. So you have Warner Brothers and HBO Max, and you have Disney and Disney Plus. They're both now releasing content on theaters as well as their streaming service at the same time. So the exclusivity window that the theaters have kind of leaned on for a long time has both kind of been a shield and kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because they've been protected by it, they haven't had to adjust to find a way to maintain their revenue and profitability. So now that the exclusivity is getting out of the way, it might be an opportunity for them to renegotiate, their take of what they're getting, partnerships, so that they, if they have the right partnerships with subscription services like a Netflix or an Amazon Prime or somebody else, where people get discounts or they come and see that studio's films in the theater for free in certain times in exchange for more revenue going to the theater itself, then it becomes kind of a win-win. And at the end of the day, if you want to know if something's going to succeed, you kind of have to look at what the needs are for everybody involved. And in this case, consumers want to go see movies in the movie theater. The fact that we had millions of people signing up for MoviePass is evidence of that. And then theaters, we know, also have periods in which seats are underutilized. We can tell that from looking at their pricing and how they have their matinee showings, and they always have, which are lower prices than other times. So if you can find a way to balance the costs to the movie theaters and the cost of subscribers, then you have a viable service. And one of the best ways to do that is and one of the reasons why it didn't work out so well for MoviePass is when you go vertical and you own more points in kind of the chain from production to consumption, then there's less cost. There are fewer hands in the cookie jar. There's less administrative costs because it's being handled more by one company. And that company also has more control and more information about how the products are being perceived and how they're being consumed. But if you can do kind of what we talked about, shifting subscriber viewings to less busy periods, then you can maximize your earnings during the busy periods. And then you can do other things like possibly the number of movies a subscriber can see in a month, or you can go unlimited. And that might sound crazy, but practically very few subscribers are actually going to take advantage of that and use it in an unlimited basis. It can sometimes, even if you're selling unlimited, and very few people are using it in a limited way, it can help you from a marketing standpoint, even if there's some trade-off down the line. And then the other part is you have to find out what are the right value adds. Could it be exclusive content? Maybe there's when you go see this episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier in the theater, maybe there's an extra scene, or maybe there's a director discussion afterwards, or maybe there's something else that's involved. Maybe you get a poster, an exclusive poster or something. But there are plenty of different things that you can do in order to kind of motivate that, or even not even motivate, just pay off the behavior that people already want to have. So they feel like they're getting value for their money.
So are you talking about then that when you sign up for this service, these add-ons just come with it for free? So
Yeah.
basically, you're just getting all these extra things to kind of keep them excited and kind of stoked about the service, even when they're not sitting in the seat at the movies watching the movie.
Yeah, because what you don't want is you don't want the app to become useless just because you're not going to a movie today, right? Maybe if the theater's closed because of COVID, you still want that app to have value for users, even if you have some kind of a tiered subscription offering, for example, even if they're in the free tier where it's ad supported or something like that, you still want that app to have value, just even if there isn't a movie theater open near them. Especially you think about rural locations where they don't have movie theaters close by. If you can find a way for that app to still have value when they're not driving 30, 45 minutes to a movie theater, then you have something that people can really feel like they've made a good choice in purchasing.
Yeah, I think it's Cinemark. I think Cinemark, right? Is that the one that's there's a bunch of those in the Bay Area, right?
Around here, yeah.
Yeah. So I think my parents have the Cinemark app, and one of the things that they do, which I've just noticed anecdotally, that tends to get them excited and gets them over to the theater is they'll get pushed a notification that they get a free popcorn if they go see a movie tonight. And I
Yeah, I
feel like
think
that's such a big value add. Like people love movie popcorn, you know that I do.
yeah,
And just to say like, hey, if you go tonight, you know, today's Friday, we're recording this on a Friday, but let's say it's a Monday, right? They're like, oh, if you go on Monday night, then we'll give you free popcorn. It's like, whoa, really cool. Like even if it's something that you can afford, it still feels good when somebody gives you something for free in addition to you being able to do something that you want to do.
yeah. And I remember at the movie theater near us, AMC, they have promotions on Tuesdays, but sometimes they also give out like limited edition. If you get the movie theater cocktail, then it comes with the sometimes with a promotional glass, or sometimes you get a key ring or a movie poster. We went and saw Alita Battle Angel, the James Cameron produced movie a little while back, and I
Uh-huh.
love the books. It's just some of the best sci-fi books I've ever read. The movie didn't quite hold up to the books, but it was still enjoyable and I liked it. But it came with a bunch of merchandise if you went on the opening weekend, and I loved it. And I still have the stuff, and it's stuff that made me feel like, oh, this is really cool. I got something that I can hold on to and has some extra value other than just sitting in the seat for a couple hours. And even at the risk of, I could spend this money and maybe I don't even love the movie, but I at least feel like I got some value.
That's that's totally true. And you know what? This just reminded me of something. You know who does this really well? Are the Major League Baseball, right? Like if you look at it, sometimes they have games. Remember they have games like on Tuesday nights and things like that. They give the free giveaways. I was talking to some friends that actually worked at the stadium, and they said that the stadium attendance goes up drastically when you give away a bobblehead. So it's kind of clear,
Absolutely.
right, that it totally works if you have the right giveaway or the right thing provided. I think, and let's move on to our predictions for the future because I think we're kind of dabbling in this a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that we're going to see movie passes being wrapped into a lot, not just one, but a lot of different service offerings. So when you buy something, let's say you bought an annual pass to Disneyland, for example, they give you two tickets to their next movie
Yeah. Well,
in
I
theater.
actually think they might have phased out their annual passes now.
Well, I know that they did, but then I also read something yesterday that said that they might, because they had so much backlash on it, that they might
Yeah.
actually come back to an annual pass. So, yeah, let's just assume that they're still doing it because I do feel like that's something that's beloved by
It's
Disney
going to come back. Yeah, I think
enthusiasts.
it will come back to here. One of the things about if somebody decides to phase out their annual passport program, they're doing pretty well. Honestly, that doesn't happen when you're like, oh, our attendance is hurting, so we're going to phase out the program that's getting more people into the park. But I do think that Disney is the perfect company to do this. For a variety of reasons. They have had huge studio film performance in the theaters. You look back probably the past 5-10 years at least, they've been dominating the box office. Probably like half at least of the top 10 movies of each year have been Disney or Disney owned studios. And they also have the parks. They also have games and music and merchandise. And now you imagine that if we both love The Mandalorian, right?
Yep.
And you can go and watch a full season of The Mandalorian, which is like 8 episodes and they're half hour each. So it's about 4 episodes. You can go watch on a Sunday, watch an entire season of The Mandalorian, walk out and get like a little Yoda bobblehead, and then get a bunch of exclusive emojis or digital stickers for your Instagram. That's all something that Disney can do, and then also have a tie-in of like, oh, if after the movie if you're in Anaheim or something, after the movie, if you go down to the park, you can get into the park for this reduced price or even free or what have you, and we're going to have like a Mandalorian and Baby Yoda meet and greet in Star Wars
That
Galaxy Edge.
yeah, that would be
You
super
can
cool.
choreograph all this stuff.
So is this the stuff we talked about a while back with even Scott Galloway talks about a lot is the rundle, this idea of this reoccurring revenue bundle of just like loading fans and enthusiasts up with everything that they would love and want if they're willing to pay these monthly subscription costs to be part of your service.
Well, it kind of is like I don't really understand what makes it a bundle versus just a normal subscription. Like I feel like a subscription by default is kind of a bundle, right? You're usually
Yeah.
not subscribing to just one thing unless you're, in the 1930s subscribing to newspapers or something.
Hmm.
But it is, and I don't think it's kind of the magic pill that he does. I I think it makes perfect sense in this case because of the user behavior around theater going, which is people love theaters. They want to go to theaters more. Sometimes they need a little bit more to get them there, but when they get there, they are typically happy about going. And part of that is if you remove the a la carte decision making process, then you can get something out of the way that can get them to theaters more. And I also think that sometimes when people go to theaters, they want to make a whole day out of it. So it is like, the movie, the film festival or the double feature or those kinds of things. It's very common going back, decades and decades. Even the drive-in theater near me always shows double features. So let's enable that so the people who are going to the theaters, especially people who are, they're living in rural areas where the nearest theater is like 45 minutes away. Let's
Yeah.
not make them go to a movie and then get the hell out of there, right? Let's let them stick around. Maybe if they want to watch another movie that works within their subscription, then let them do it, and then they can hang out. Let's bring back things like the arcade. I know it's not going to be the arcade like it was before, but we all remember, before the movie or after the movie, hanging out and playing a few games.
Of course.
Something like that, where it's not just a fast food model, but really a full fledged experience. I think that it can really pay off, especially for these companies like an Amazon or a Disney, who don't need to make all of their money just off of movie ticket sales.
Hmm.
Then they can really do a lot in order to flesh out this experience.
Well said, man. I am going to give my final prediction and then we'll wrap up. I believe in the next 24 months, we'll see if I'm right or not. One of these major companies, Disney, Netflix, Amazon, Apple, one of them will purchase one of these movie houses, such as AMC, Alamo Drafthouse, Cinemark, you know, the list goes on, right? And they're just going to roll it in to their normal subscription model like Amazon Prime or whatever, and they're just going to give you movie tickets. That's it. It's just part of the service. So you can go see movies there if you want, but if you're, let's say, an Amazon Prime member, then you get 4 tickets a year or something like that, and you could just go to the movies whenever you want with those tickets. I just have a feeling that going to the movies is going to become an add-on feature to one of these major companies looking to kind of dominate the media space.
I agree with you that people are going to get involved in that way. I don't think that it's going to be a purchase of the theater chain unless it's Apple. I think Apple can get away with it,
Uh-huh.
partially because they're not producing in the volume that are going to threaten the studios. I think if Disney or Warner Brothers steps in and buys a studio, we're going to see with or buys a theater chain. We're going to end up seeing with theater chains what we already are starting to see with streaming services, which is they're only going to show their own content. They're not going to show.
Mm,
So then you have to find a theater owned by Paramount to go see the next Star Trek movie, right? So
yeah.
that could be get really annoying. But what I definitely do see is that they can partner with these theater chains such that if you want to go see the latest Marvel movie, it's free on certain days or discounted on other days, and or maybe it's free after the second week of release.
Hmm.
And for a Disney movie, for example, this is really smart for Disney to do this. Disney, after they've made most of their money, which tends to happen in the first few weeks of release,
Mhm.
then they can get their attendance numbers up so they can boast about how they're the most attended movies out there because they're boosting it through subscriptions. So
Ah, yeah.
it's kind of like back when Prince got his album released and it shot to number one in the on the Billboard charts because he was giving out a copy of the album with every ticket sale to see him in concert. Right?
Exactly.
It's a way to kind of goose the numbers, and goosing the numbers has a lot of value because Prince got a lot of people to listen to that album that might not have otherwise. Right? Most people, a lot of people who went to Prince concerts loved like Purple Rain and 1999 and some of the earlier albums and didn't quite catch up, especially when he was putting out like an album every year or two. Same thing with Disney is like, all right, well, you've seen it once. If you're a major Marvel fan or a Disney fan, you probably paid to see it in the first week or two, and now because you already have a Disney Plus subscription, you have some free time on a Wednesday afternoon or something. Maybe you just go check out the movie again because you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So I
Good
think that's
good
something
point.
that they could do, and it could really hype up their content a lot, and that reflexively helps them sell subscriptions.
All right. Well, we'll see how this all plays out over the next 24 months and we'll circle back and talk about it. Well, Dee, I think this is a wrap for our new show called Hyped Up. So we're going to weave these in every season here and there, just go back and take a look at companies and kind of do a post mortem on them and talk about their experience. And maybe even some of these companies might reemerge. But I wanted to thank everyone again for their support since we started this podcast. We really love your feedback, and we really love that you keep sharing it with a friend, and our numbers, keep rising every week because we really love doing it. This is our final episode of season 2. I can't even believe it. And we're already getting started on season 3. So, in about 2 to 3 weeks, you'll see that first episode drop. And we hope to have even more guests for season 3 and lots of interesting topics to dive into. So thank you all again, and we will see you all in the beginning of season 3.